Got one. Thank you, brother. I'm a Tim Tripp fan, so I'm so happy that this portion of Arkansas has him available. And I'm looking over, and you've got a couple of visiting churches with you. That's nice, isn't it? It is. And did I hear that you spoke here last week? Is that right? And did they dismiss for you? No, they didn't. All right, just asking. Kind of like to know where I stand in the hierarchy of things. Yes, if you've not met me before, your run of luck is now over. I'm Patrick, and not qualified to be here in many ways. And the reason is I'm a scientist. That's how I was trained. That's how I work. I'm still involved with research, all neuroscience type stuff. So don't come up to me later to show me your rash, unless I only work between the ears and from the chin to the top. That's it. I'm still on staff at a few universities and alike, and I work at one of the first churches of Christ. In 1833, Alexander Campbell and Talbot Fanning started the Fourth Avenue church that I'm at now. And we've been there right downtown and have a great time. Love that church, love the people there. That said, I want to talk to you about a time in my life that was a bit dark. I was raised in the churches of Christ most of my life. We started off with a different one. We moved to Church of Christ. And when we moved to Church of Christ, we went all the way to the far right edge of the Church of Christ. Just right of Attila the Hun. We were over there. And when I left home early. Kids don't do this, but British people do things different. I left home at 16 and went to university. I'd already been going to university for a couple of years at that time. Sorry, I hate to bring that up. And so I was already prepared, and I was away. And I ran from God because you could not please God. There's nothing you could do. You know, the Old Testament has 600 plus commands. We had them in the thousands, and there's nothing you could do. So I don't think you could ever call me an atheist. I was more of an agnostic. An agnostic's an atheist with no guts. They don't want to say there is no God. What they say is, well, who knows? And that gets them off the hook. But I'm working in science. And in my first doctorate, when I was working with some synapses firing across, there had to be thousands of things exactly right, at the right time, milliseconds, for this thing to fire and work. And it's one of, at that time, we knew of dozens. Now we know that there are hundreds of electrochemicals, neurochemicals that are firing. And I realized there is no way I could make an explosion do this. You know, I knew the standard story. Once upon a time, there was nothing. Then it blew up. And now we have pandas. I skipped a few bits there, but that was basically the story. And I know. Do you remember Northern Ireland during the Troubles? We called them the 60s and 70s. I've seen things blow up. It doesn't cause this. We don't see a post office go and bricks and mortar everywhere, and you go, oh, that's horrible. Oh, look, flowers. It doesn't. It deconstructs, it doesn't construct. So I can remember going into my flat. I went back to Scotland. I was down in England. Went back up to Scotland, walked to my flat in the southwest of the country, looked up at the ceiling and said out loud, all right, so you're there, but I don't like you. And I don't know what I'm going to do about this. And it started me on a long journey. I had just really come back to faith in a tentative, bruised way when I came back to America and met Tim and his family, and his dad and mom had a lot to do with making sure that I had time to heal and grow during that time. They needed me, I needed them. It was a God thing. I want to talk to you tonight about some of the things I found on that journey before I came back to the States. Things that bothered me somewhat, because I read a bunch of literature. First of all, I was hoping to be a deist. If you don't know what a deist is, that's where you believe in God, but who cares because he's not paying attention to you. He just wound up the universe, set it free, and he's away somewhere on holiday vacation, probably in Florida, because that seems to be the home of the retired and newlywed and nearly dead. So that's probably where he went. But I tried to be that, but it seemed to be, that wasn't working. So I read Hindu Vedas. I didn't read all of them. There are quite a bit of them. Read the Quran. I read the Book of Mormon. not even good fiction. I read the Icelandic sagas, just in case I might be a Viking. You know, I read those. I read the Bible. Now, the Bible was very different in that it was checkable. If they say they went up from here to there, it's up from there to there. If the guy says this guy was a tetrarch over this period of time, and he was, and it's checkable. The others don't have that, by the way. But even that didn't really get me, because people can write historical books, and they can write them in history, and that didn't get me. But then, to explain what happened next, I need to tell you what my favorite movie is. It's Kirk Douglas in the Vikings. Now, don't go rent it. It's not a good movie. It's not a bad, well, it's not naughty. It's just, it's not well written. It's bad. It's poorly acted. Why is it my favorite? I hear you cry. Oh, well, that's because there's one scene, for example, and the slaves are rowing as the long ships come up the fjord. Well, Vikings never had slave rowers, but let's let that go. Let's let that go, because there's something more important here. As they get in close on the slave rowers, one of them's wearing a watch. That's good theater, that is, right there. During one of the battle scenes, you see a jet contrail in the sky. During another one, on Passion Speech, if you look behind him, there are electric lines on the ridge. This is called an anachronism. Think of Shakespeare, for example, the Scottish play, Macbeth. If you remember, as it opens, the boil, boil, trouble, you know, that sort of thing's going on, right? Well, in walks a man to report of a battle, and he says that he hears cannons off in the distance, and that's a man you want on your team right there, because gunpowder wouldn't make it to Britain for about another 300 years. So if he can hear it already, that's an important person. You want him on your team. That's called an anachronism. It's out of time. So let's say that you take a trip. You decide, we're going overseas on holiday. We're going to go to Egypt, because you've not been reading the news. So you go to Egypt, and they're doing a tour for you. Now, and it's a boring tour. It's dead boring. This happens, it happens. So you're just kind of kicking around in the sand when you hit a rock. And so you're playing around with your foot with the rock, and you realize, well, this is not just a rock. This is the top of a big rock, and it's a pointy rock. And we're cutting to the chase here. You have found a new pyramid. Well, it's not new, but it's an undiscovered pyramid until you messed with the rock. So they all dig it out, and they're going, oh, this is fantastic. It hasn't even been robbed, which is so unusual. And so they open it up for the first time, and since you're the one that found it, they say you can go in first. And since you've never seen any of the mummy movies, you go in first. As you go in first, you look around, you've got your torch, your flashlight, and you're looking, there are hieroglyphics, and there's a sarcophagus, and there's the food storage for the trip to the beyond. There's a Buick, and then there's over here. And that's when you freeze. You come back over to the Buick, because now you have a problem. Either the Egyptians made Buicks, or somebody's been here. I was reading through the Bible, trying to see what it really was, because I thought I knew the Bible forwards and backwards. I found out what I knew was our doctrine forwards and backwards. I really didn't know the book. And so I started off reading, and I got to the book that causes people to break their promise to God. And that's Leviticus. Because they say, I'm going to read through the Bible. And then they read Genesis, and that's pretty good. That's got a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll in Genesis. That's good stuff. Then you get to Exodus, and frogs are falling out of the sky, and cattle are dying, and so there's a movie. And so you're into that. Then you hit Leviticus. Oh, my goodness. Mind-numbingly repetitive and boring. I'm allowed to say that. God knows. God knows this. You're allowed to say this. After about the 20th or 30th meal offering, you're going, seriously? Then I hit Leviticus 11. Maybe you have to be a scientist. But something clicked, that there was a Buick in the pyramid. Now, Leviticus 11, sheer poetry this is. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, say to the Israelites, of all the animal that live on land, these are the ones you may eat. You may eat any animal that has a divided hoof and that chews the cud. Okay, he could have stopped there, actually, but he doesn't. He goes on at great length to show that he's serious, and there are no exceptions. So there are some that only chew the cud or only have a divided hoof, but you must not eat them. He could have stopped there, but no. The camel, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is ceremonially unclean for you. The hyrax, although it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It's unclean for you. Why aren't these on Hallmark cards? Or sung at weddings. The rabbit, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof. It is unclean. What's going on? All right. First of all, and this may trouble some of you, the Bible has science in it, but it's not a scientific textbook. It was not written to be science. It was written to help the Israelites survive until Jesus is born. Therefore, if you're looking for it to be science, you're going to get disappointed sometimes. For example, with the bunny. It says the rabbit, though it chews the cud, doesn't have a divided hoof. Rabbits don't chew the cud. Now, am I saying the Bible's made a mistake? No, because it wasn't written to be science. It was written to say, watch them, and if their mouth actions like this and their feet are like this, you can eat them. It wasn't requiring them to kill, slaughter, and do an autopsy on every animal to see if you could eat it. He was giving them outward ways of looking. Now, we'll get to why in a bit. First of all, anybody here love talking about quantum physics? I do. My wife calls me Sheldon because I get so excited. Try to explain quantum physics to your goldfish. It's a little difficult. God trying to tell Moses how he created the planet is about that hard. And so he tells us in narrative and story. It's the best we can get. I get that. I'm happy with it. I'm glad he didn't do a data download on us. It'd blow our circuits. And so he says, now, by the way, kids, if you don't know what a cud is, some animals have segmented stomachs. Sometimes you'll hear people say that animal has 5 stomachs. Technically, 1 stomach, 5 segments. What happens is they'll eat but grasses, and it'll go into one, and that'll digest it a bit. Then they burp it back into their mouth, and they chew it again, and they swallow it, and it goes into another stomach to be digested again. That's why they can eat grass and survive. They're getting more nutrients out of it than you can. Watch a cow. If you don't have cable or something, watch a cow, and the cow will just be standing there doing nothing, and all of a sudden you'll notice it going, and then chewing, and you're going, wait a minute, it didn't take a bite. Didn't have to, already had one. Just moved it. So that's what it's talking about, chewing the cud and having a divided hoof. Now, going through this, one thing you also need to be stressed here. The Bible never tells them why. Never does. Just do it. And this would have been bad news, because back then it wasn't like food was everywhere. You found food, you ate food. He's saying there's some stuff off the menu. Well, why? Doesn't tell him. But we know why. There are at least 5 different classifications of food that are off the menu here. First one, we all know. What's a food that Muslims and Jews cannot eat? Pig. There you go. You should know that. You're in Arkansas. I hear that yelled at random times. Now, why could you not eat pig? Well, you can eat pig. You can eat pig. But they could not eat pig. And the reason was trichinosis, parasites in the meat. We don't have that issue as a rule because the way we raise them, our cleanliness and our inspections takes care of that sort of thing. But I have a friend who's a hog inspector, and I've always thought, on my worst day, I can say, I'm not Craig. He seems to enjoy it. I don't know how the hogs feel, but he seems to enjoy it. So anyway, we all know that. And by the way, I had a brilliant suggestion when the Iraq War first started. My son's a U.S. Marine, so I was thinking, how do we do this without loss of life? Got it. Fly over and bomb them with pigs. Now, think about this. They have to be live pigs, because that way they still make the bomb noise as they fall, that all the way down, right? And then when they hit, they'll splatter. And the Muslims have to leave. And we can go in and tidy up a bit. put fences, and we're fine. Never heard back from President Bush. I met some very nice people, but in a very dark SUV. But anyway, so that's one classification. Animals that tend to have parasites in the meat are off. This eliminates them. But there's another. What about the bunny? Let's go back to the bunny. Bunny meat actually is high in protein, low fat, doesn't tend to get any kind of parasites that we get by eating, so ingest. And so what's wrong with bunnies? Well, you're barefoot people. You're moving in the desert. Your feet will crack. Your feet will bleed sometimes. It happens when you're in the desert and barefoot people. When bunnies pee, and I'm guessing this is probably the first time in the phrase when bunnies pee have been used in this church building. When bunnies pee, they release a microbe that if you're barefoot, it can get in your bloodstream, cause a blood disease called tularemia, and you die. I began to search and found out these animals are also all eliminated by these rules. Animals that tend to have dangerous or fatal microbes in their waste. And you might think, isn't all waste? No, most urine is sterile, frankly. You will find that it's most of the time you're good. It is basic hygiene and you'll be all right. This, no, you wouldn't be. So those are off the table. What's another one? Well, animals that the meat tends to spoil without giving you much in the way of information. It's kind of like the mystery Tupperware. You open up the refrigerator, not really sure what this one is. Somebody cracks it open, they breathe in, they go, oh, 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 oh. And then what do? They smell this, smell it. Why? No. If I find myself needing to be uncomfortable, I'll slam my head in something, I'll poke myself with a stick. I don't need to be breathing. By the way, I'm going to ruin your evening here. All odors are caused by particulates, which means if you can smell it, you're ingesting it. You walk into a stinky bathroom, back out. I don't know how long you can hold your breath, but I bet you can't. If you smell it, you're ingesting it. And by the way, ladies, if you're and young men, if you're putting on too much of the old smell good, it doesn't smell good anymore. It's against the Geneva Convention, is what it is. Yeah, you smell like the outside of an Abercrombie store in the mall. You haven't know. You can always find dead asthmatics laying outside. Out there. Anyway, the foods that spoil without giving you obvious, like milk. Have you ever sniffed milk and said, I wonder if this is bad? Put it down. Milk is not expensive. Stomach pumping, expensive. Medical deductibles, expensive. Go get other milk. I've had people say, but I wanted to drink, I've already poured my bowl of cereal. I'm going, seriously? That's the tip. I have 48 cents worth of cereal. I can't let it waste. So slice off some of that milk and put it on here. Every year in America, there are a certain number of people who are killed by churches. Well, technically, they're killed by church suppers. Because people will have a meeting and a singing and then dinner on the ground. But the food's been sitting out. To this day, a Jew will not eat mayonnaise, will not have milk products touching meat. In fact, a kosher home has 2 different sets of counters. Never put one set of food on the other side. It's always kept clean. Most forms of honey are off because you don't know what got into the honey. By the way, your honey's fine. Don't worry about it. All of these type of things are off the table. There are also the foods that have toxins within them that are not microbes. Think of shrimp. I know some of you like shrimp wrapped with bacon. You've been hit twice by chapter 11. By the way, if you're thinking, I can't eat it, no, you can eat it. We have EpiPens. Go for it. We have medicine now. They had to keep the Jews alive till Jesus shows up, right? Now, according to Jesus and Cornelius and Peter on top of the roof, eat what you want to. Go see Jesus. That's the rule, actually. Study all diseases. Pick the one you want to die from. Eat accordingly. That's fine. But, for example, those of you that are allergic to shrimp are not actually allergic to shrimp. Doesn't really help you as you're swelling up dying for me to tell you this. You're allergic to the toxins that shrimp eat. There are things in the environment that are so bad, God created animals to get rid of them. And he marked them. They're going to live in the sea, but no scales, on and on. So things like lobster, shrimp, catfish, shark. Shrimp are basically the cockroaches of the sea. Their job is to eat what nothing else will eat. Get it out of the system. Then we come and we eat it. And we'll go, I'm allergic to shrimp. No, you're not. You're just allergic. Well, it's too late. They're dead. Poor guy died in error. It's rather like cats. I've had people say, I'm allergic to cats. Technically, no. Cats have no allergens produced by them. You're allergic to mites that live on cats. Cats are full of mites. And if you have cats, that's fine. Just be aware of that. I've had people say, no, my cat's clean. It licks itself. People, I worked for 10 years in Detroit with homeless people. I've seen people lick themselves. I've never yet gone, that guy's spiffy. That guy is spiffy. That one is. You could eat off that guy right there. He just licked himself. Mites are everywhere, and some people are super sensitive. A mattress has, on average, 2 billion dust mites. You know what they eat? They eat you. Little flakes of skin that come off of you, that's like taco chips to them. Put your ear on the mattress, you can almost hear, riba, riba, angale, angale. They're very excited, very excited. If you have a pillow that is more than 6 months old, it is at least 30% heavier now than when you bought it. What makes up the extra weight? Hair, skin off of you, oil off of you, and the mites that are eating it. So I'll be seeing several of you at Walmart later. I get that. There's another classification. We've done 4. This one has nothing to do with medicine. Has everything to do with society. Food that doesn't, or animals that do not eat grasses, but require water-intensive grain, like oats and wheat. You weren't allowed to eat horses or camels. And you might be thinking, who wants to do that? All over the world, people eat them. The French eat snails and horses, both ends of the speed continuum. They do. I know why they eat snails, because it's the only animal French people are brave enough to hunt. Oh no, Henri, we have wounded it. We must flee. My wife's American and she's normal. She always wants me to bring that up. She tells me she said, you got to quit making fun of the French because you're going to make somebody mad. And I looked at her, I said, and the consequences would be, and that's pretty much where we left it. I have some French friends. I go over to their house, they surrender. It's a lot of fun. Why would he remove those? Well, a horse, for example, takes nearly a dozen years for you to have enough horses out of it to enough level of maturity to where it is economically feasible to eat the horse. All those years, you're pouring massive amounts of water and grain into that so that a few rich people can eat. God said no. Now, do you remember? You celebrated recently. Once upon a time, there's a bit of disagreement between your folk and my folk. You didn't want a royalty. Everybody's equal. So you shot us. Fair enough. Fair enough. We love what you've done with the country. And yet, over time, you have developed a royalty. People who don't follow the same rule, congressmen and senators and such, don't have to pay into Social Security. Don't have to worry about their medical care. Don't have to follow a lot of rules that you do. Cannot get a speeding ticket. Did you know that? It's because they're in session. They're seated. And therefore, on and on and on and on. And they eat better food than you too, don't they? And they fly in better planes than you do. Isn't that interesting? God said, no. No. We're all going to be on the same level playing field. Well, that said, that was interesting, but that wasn't what really got me. That's just the warm-up. And we only have 20 minutes for the payoff, so here we go. Verse 27, of all the animals that walk, verse 26 rather. Verse 24, let's keep going back. You make yourself unclean by these. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean till evening. Hello, Buick. Used to be that doctors, until, by the way, around 1900, doctors wear butcher's aprons. That's where the white comes from. And they would saw off a limb of somebody who had been wounded and wipe their hands on their apron. Then they'd go deliver a baby, wipe their hands, then check you for a plague, wipe their hands. And by the end of the day, it looked like a butcher's. And they infected people far more people in World War I died of infection than of wounds. The same with Civil War. Because doctors wouldn't wash their hands. They didn't know that if you touched something, you became unclean. The first person to really figure that out was a doctor named Dr. Joseph Snow, who figured it out with a standing pipe of water in London, but nobody paid attention to him. And he was really thinking about drinking it. Another guy named Lister, figured out if you touched things and then touched something else, you could actually spread disease. And they took away his medical license, and he died in poverty for believing in these mystical little invisible beasts. By the way, people ask, he didn't invent Listerine. They named it after him, but he didn't invent it. It wasn't until the 1900s that we began to realize, Leeuwenhoek and others looked and they knew things were alive, but they knew now you can get sick by touching or by sneezing or contact with microbes. This was written somewhere between 1500 and 1100 BC. We're 3,000 years too early. This is a Buick in a pyramid. Something is out of place. Whoever touches this will be unclean till evening. Now, that didn't mean that if I touched it today at 4, that I could come home at 7. The Jews have a different way of speaking. When they say till evening, it means till the next one, tomorrow. So you had 24 hours. Why is that important? Viruses and most dangerous microbes, if they're going to get you, will get you in the first 24 hours. If you were well this morning and sick this evening, it's a virus. If you've been slowly getting sick for a week, that's bacteria. And so it's a different sort of thing. Viruses move quickly. This is to get you away from viruses. So what does he tell you to do? Get away from the community, wash your clothes. You might say, but my clothes didn't touch it. Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. When you touch it, and it comes onto you. You don't want to know what I know and have to walk around people. I'll ask people how they're doing. They're hugging me and they're saying, thanks for asking. I've been so sick. And I'm going. So the next 4 or 5 people, I hug them and I'm wiping my hands on the back. You doing all right? Everything okay? Good. Policeman says, leave me alone. Going into bathrooms. People, if we followed Leviticus, I need to cut to the chase here because I do this for a whole semester at our church. Every few years, I'll do a whole semester on science and scripture and how that works together and what it means and what it doesn't mean and the like. And here it's just too fast. If we followed scripture, we would not have our bathrooms set up the way we do. Because in Leviticus, where you dug your latrines could have nothing to do with anything that you touched to your face. Where is your toothbrush? It's probably sitting up looking at your toilet. Hello. And every time you flush, there's a viral mist that goes into the air. I've had people say, but it has to air out. Who told you this? Besides, if it did, it can air out in a drawer. Go get another, while you're getting your mattress and pillow tonight, get another toothbrush. Rotate those things. Put them in a dishwasher. You can do that too. That's pretty effective. Not 100% though, so it's like playing the lotto. Anyway, where are your towels and washcloths? Very often hanging right behind the toilet. So they get it first. And then wash your face. Well, good luck. If we washed our hands like God told in Leviticus to wash your hands, we wouldn't have flu epidemics. If we arranged our bathrooms like we're supposed to. You go into the bathroom, a public bathroom, you wash your hands thoroughly, noticing that several others don't. And then you go to dry. How are you going to dry those? With the dryer? Don't use the dryer. Where's it getting its air? And now it's concentrated. I've had people say, but it's hot. If it's hot enough to kill the bacteria, it would melt your hands. So that's not doing it. The average cycle puts over 100,000 viruses on your hands. So don't do that. By the way, if you ever work with a medicine, any hospital always has the paper towels. Have you noticed that? They also have something else. They'll have a trash can right outside so that you can grab the handle with the towel. Must be dry. Don't use a moist one. It's like a superhighway. Boom, it's there. Use a dry one. They'll put it there. Now, every so often I have to wash my hands. There's just the dryer. There's no towel. I'm standing there. I look, and there's the handle facing me. What do? Well, if you have time, wait. Somebody's coming. Zip out. If you have to touch the handle, touch the lower part, because most people touch the higher part. Look, that's where the finish is normally gone. And as you then leave, hug a couple more people. But this would have taken care of it. A lot of people, for example, there's a certain number of people in America every year that die. Well, first of all, they go into the emergency room. Now, if you have an emergency room doctor, he'll catch it like this, or she'll catch it like that. But if it's just a doctor rotating in, they might not ask the right questions, right? It's different. And that's not an insult. I know the brain. You come to me with a foot issue, I'm going to go, wow, look at that thing. That's not my field. I don't do that. So let's say you have blinding headaches, terrible intestinal distress, mood disorders, your eyes are hurting, sensitive to light, hair may be changing color. If it's a good ER doctor, they'll say, have you left the country? Have you been to Central or South America? Did you buy pottery or drink things out of pottery? What happens, you got heavy metal toxicity because they didn't do their pottery right. You follow Leviticus, you'll do it right. By the way, that's incredibly dangerous and bad for you because we don't have a pill that fixes that. It's permanent. We can treat some symptoms, but we can't fix you. Leviticus would sort that out. But look at the cycle of contagion. Whoever touches one of these will be unclean till evening. Verse 29, they move around the ground. You can't have those. When one of them dies, verse 32, and falls on something, that article, whatever its use, will be unclean. Whether it's made of, this is important, wood, cloth, hide, or sackcloth. There's something missing there. Metal. Metal's not porous. You can wash it off and use it. All of these have to be thrown away or put into water. Put it into water till evening, and then it'll be clean. Why? Guess what? Guess how we treat viruses today? Separate from others, drink plenty of fluids, time, fluid, dilution, sometimes just exposure to air and light. That's all we got. We don't have a cure for viral diseases. We have vaccinations that'll help you keep getting many of them. But people say, no, I took Tamiflu. I'm glad we have Tamiflu. I really am. It costs about $100. It'll shorten your flu symptoms by about 12 to 15 hours. That's it. And only if you take it fast. That's not a cure. And by the way, all it does is it interferes with the virus's dating life. They have a hard time reproducing. Let's just put it that way, shall we? I have no idea how young people are in here. I'll never forget the time we're just driving along in the car, and I always had to sit in the middle in the back because I had 2 older sisters and didn't even know we had windows for a while. And my mother suddenly says to turns around to me, she goes, all right, you kids. My mother's a little Irish lady. All right, you kids, everybody look out that side of the car. Look over there. Look at that side of the car. And I'm looking over there. It's just a field. So I look over here, and there were 2 cows. And they were playing a singularly unsuccessful job of leapfrog. But I had to give it to the one. He wasn't quitting. He was going to make it go. But I'll never forget that my mother turned to my father and said, they shouldn't be doing things like that right outside. God may not have as many hang-ups as we do. I'm just saying. Wash it. Now look at the old big bad news, verse 33. If one of them falls in a clay pot, do you get to wash it? No. Everything in it's unclean, you must break the pot. There's a cycle here of contagion. To break the pot would have been bad news. You can't go get another pot. The old English folk song, Scarborough Fair, that Simon and Garfunkel did many years ago, they did a different version of it, has many, many verses. All of them are describing this wonderful woman. None of them describe her looks, because that had nothing to do with it back then. It was, can she make a shirt? It was, how can she produce something? If you didn't have a shirt, you were out of shirts. Do you remember the people gambled for the bloody rags off of Jesus at the foot of the cross? It goes, cloth. Do you remember afterwards, whenever Jesus finds his apostles and they're fishing, that the Bible says one put on his clothes to jump into the river, or the sea and swim to him? You didn't wear your clothes when you were working. You only had one set. It was so clothing and pots. Now, do not get angry at me. I didn't make this up, and I did not, and I'm just reporting in history. You could get a pretty good wife for 3 pots. And now just because a gecko ran through your kitchen and hopped in a pot and hopped right out, you got to break it, and suddenly you're just like one of those 2-pot hussies that live a couple of tents away. Because you know what people are like. They do social strata by what they own. And their status, how much I cost, that sort of thing. God never tells them why. We know why. It gets in the clay. It becomes systemic then. It leaches out. By the way, the rules later in Leviticus about digging latrines and planting and such would have kept a lot of people alive in America. We lived in Colorado. That's where my wife is from. Before we moved to Franklin, Tennessee about 2.5 years ago. And we had several people die, and they traced it to melons. Melons that were grown on the sides, the front range of the Rockies. The people were irrigating with water that had gotten contaminated with sewage. So you wash the outside of the fruit, doesn't matter, it's inside. Follow Leviticus, that doesn't happen. Goes more. Any food you're allowed to eat that's come into contact with water from such a pot is unclean. Now wait, here we go. Here comes a mouse. The mouse runs through, hits a spoon. The spoon falls into a pot. Water splashes out on the food. All of it has to go. Except, watch this. Any food you're allowed to eat that's come into contact with water from any such pot's unclean. Any liquid that's drunk from such a pot's unclean. Anything that one of their carcasses falls on becomes unclean. An oven or cooking pot must be broken up. A spring or cistern, that's a lot of water. If you found a dead person in a spring or a cistern, you can pull the dead person, dead body, whatever it is, out, wait a while, and still use the water. Why? Dilution. The miracle of dilution. It's brilliant. But if it's in a pot of water, pot has to go. But it goes further. If a carcass falls on any seeds that are being planted, they're fine. But if water then falls on those seeds with the carcass, they're unclean. We know, you know why? Because a seed has a shell that will not allow anything into it unless it gets wet. We figured that out in the 1800s. How did they know this? There's so much here. There are two basic stories of the world, all right? Two basic stories. One, the universe is a box, and everything within the box must be explained by things within the box. Nothing has ever reached inside the box. Everything in the box came from the box. That's all there is. The other story is the universe is a box, but at least once, if not many times, something has reached in from outside the box. Placed things, taken away, adjusted things. This is our story. That's the story of an atheist, which makes more sense. Once upon a time, there was nothing, then it blew up, and now we have pandas, or God brought us into being. And you can fight about whether he did it in, real quick, real slow. You can fight about all that you want to. But those are the two basic stories. So what you going to do with the stories? Because Leviticus isn't done. I got a call. And the guy said, we need you to teach at University of Michigan on these dates if you're open. And I checked and I said, I can do that. And it was like a year ahead of time. And I was, sure, I'll do that. And he says, great, I'll tell him. And he hung up. And I looked at the phone and I went, he didn't tell me my subject or what school I'm teaching. Is it the med school or the psych school or whatever? Well, he called back a couple months later and he said, I'm here to give you your topic. And I said, well, great. What? He said, women and Christianity and history. And I went, wrong guy. You need a theologian guy. You need a history guy. I'm not your guy. And he goes, well, we tried, but you're the only name they would allow to come. I said, who's they? And it was the LGBT group there at Michigan. And they wanted a Christian to gnaw on for a few days. And I went, okay, I'll love them too. So I walked in, and there a lot of angry faces looking at me. And my opening line was, what? I said, take your best shot. So we went back, and we had a good time. They'd throw objections. One lady, Christians are against sex. And I went, no, we're not. She goes, yes, you are. And I went, no, we're not. We did that for a while, because I'm paid by the hour. I got time. Then I told her, I know, I work for the guy that invented it. And then we talked about Song of Solomon and the like. And by the way, Song of Solomon is about sex. It's not an allegory of Christ's love for the church. Stop it. It's about sex. Second thing you need to know, guys, is now you know that and you run to it to get tips. Please remember, and you can learn a lot, but please remember all the compliments now have passed their sell-by date. So don't look at the woman anymore and go, your hair's like a bunch of goats coming off the mountain. That was a good thing. Now it isn't. You're right. So just remember that. All right. Your nose is like Mount Hermon. Not so much. They liked the big nose back then. Not so much now. Anyway, moving along. All of this, one came and said, whenever a woman has her cycle, shall we say, she's unclean in Scripture. And I went, yeah. And I said, hang on. You're thinking unclean means bad or lesser. It doesn't. Unclean means you separate from the community. So I want you to think about this for a bit. Women, in a very broad age group, go anywhere from 2 days to 7 days a month in this situation. They are then separated from the community. Because I'm going to try to be as delicate as I can here. When there's a pathway out, there's a pathway in. When that pathway is moist, it's a superhighway. Many women will tell you they tend to get cold-like symptoms or other issues during that time. That's why. In God's economy, they were allowed to be away from this. And women in a group tend to synchronize. They, in a military barracks, a college dorm, university dorm, they tend to synchronize. So it's not one woman standing on a rock somewhere out there going, no. It's a bunch of women who are, I didn't go to preacher school, sorry. It's a bunch of women who don't have to take care of the kids or cook or do laundry or tend to a husband, but get to hang out with the girls. Stop me when this sounds like it's punishment enough. You get the point? And the same thing, when a little girl was born, she got to stay outside the community a lot longer than when a little boy was born. He had to come back into the community. But the little girl got to stay out there much longer, stay with mommy. And mommy was free from all those problems for a long time. After birth, she was unclean for several weeks, sometimes much longer. Why? Well, God was giving her a break. No sexual demands, no housework, no. That's actually pretty nice. We went through the whole thing. There's more here. We don't have the time for it. Oh, we don't have any time. There's even, there are chapters about oozes and leakages. Just warning you. Don't take it to Wendy's later and say, I'm going to read this book. Not so much. There's a chapter on rashes. There are a couple of different places on molds and mildews. Like God told him a bunch and then was talking about something else and went, wait a minute. I just thought of a couple more things about molds and mildew. So he did another whole bunch of thing on there because molds and mildews can be deadly. But we figured that out in 1950. There's a Buick in the pyramid. This isn't the only place. There's a lot of other ones. Like George Washington, remember him? Terrorist? No, hero. Osama bin... No, it was George. It was George Washington. He got a cold and you killed him. Well, you were treating him by bleeding him. The Bible says don't do that. The Bible says life is in the blood. There's so much. It's not a Buick in a pyramid. It's Jay Leno's garage in a pyramid. But you have to know where to look. And I wish somebody had told me about that rather than about 5,000 rules that really aren't in there. So just be aware of this. He doesn't have to tell us why. Maybe one day we'll figure it out. It's just our job to do it. Let's pray, and you may flee the premises. Father in heaven, thanks for letting us figure it out. Thanks for letting us play. Thanks for keeping us safe, bringing Jesus into the world. Thank you for the Jews and all they went through for all those years so that we all might have Jesus, Jew and Gentile alike. Thank you for Tim and the work he does here. Thanks for Jake and Josh. Thanks for the shepherds and for the churches that have come to visit tonight. Father, when we doubt, as we most certainly will, help us to remember Leviticus, that you really do know what you're talking about, and sometimes it's best just to trust and obey. In the name of Jesus, the whole church says, amen. Cheerio.